Hello and welcome to the Dragyn's Den podcast, episode 1. We are starting this whole ordeal today. I'm very excited to be the main host and speaker for the podcast. I am your one and only Dragyn. And for the very first episode for the podcast, we will be going into my personal traveling experiences. I am very excited to talk about traveling. With everything that's been going on in the world, it's hard to kind of look back and think about what was normal and how often I was able to travel. So now this is the time to sort of break it all down and remember that this will happen again one day. It will happen. It just will take a little bit of time and the world to kind of pick itself back up piece by piece, and we'll be able to see more eventually. But let's get started. I will be talking about all of my trips that I have taken in the past 6 years now, I suppose. Well, a little longer, because I'll talk about my first big family trip to Las Vegas. So 6 years with consistent traveling, and then one story from before then. Let's get started with that first story. So when I was younger, my family, so this is like pretty much before a lot of the bad happened in my family, so I'll just leave it at that because that can be another podcast another time. But my dad, my mom, my sister and I, we took a family trip to the one and only Las Vegas, Nevada. If you guys don't know a lot about Nevada, don't go there in August when it's hot, because it's desert and it's hot. For us Canadians out there, it was 40 degrees Celsius 5 days straight. The entire 5 days we were there. Very hot, grueling sunshine and heat. My goodness, the first time I've ever experienced that. It was wild. But Las Vegas was a very cool trip and a very important trip for me. I realized recently that if it wasn't for that trip, I wouldn't have realized how, even if it's just the United States, or how just even the world in general, how they viewed Canadians. It was in that trip where we talked to, storekeepers and the various, staff that worked around where we visited. So we walked down the strip, we went to some restaurants, hotels, basically people who worked in those businesses. And we would share how we were Canadian and we were on vacation and enjoying the time away. However, they always would make those very stereotypical kind of snarky or sarcastic responses like, "Oh, you're Canadian. I bet you're sorry that you're Canadian, eh?" And, do those jokes quite a bit, as well as, are the jokes about, "Oh, yeah, how about that?" Because we say about as a boot, but we don't really say about as a boot. It depends on where you're from in Canada. There are some places where the accent is very thick and it will slip. However, where I'm from, and predominantly the rest of Canada, we don't really say a boot. So, clearing the stereotypical air right there for you guys in the podcast. But we were confronted with that over and over again. I also remember one particular experience. I don't really remember where we were. However, there was a shopkeep. I believe it was a shopkeep or a cashier or someone like that, where they were asking me questions about Canada. And the questions they were asking, I was like, who taught you about my country? Because they were asking so I heard so what part of Canada are you from? Are you from the French part or the English part? Are you from the east part or the west part? So let me break that down a bit. West part, east part, totally fine to ask. We have a west coast and east coast. Makes sense. Answered that question quite normally. I'm from the west part, just by the Rocky Mountains. Normal answer, totally fine question to ask. The next part though, are you from French Canada or English Canada? What I learned from him, this guy, was that he thought that the East Coast was predominantly French, West Coast was only English, and no languages were spoken at the same time in both places. So he literally thought it was a huge split and divide. Now, for the most part, that was true. We do have Quebec on the East Coast that is predominantly Francophone, that speaks a lot of French. But there are also lots of other French cities, towns, villages all over Canada, and they are actually Francophone cities. When you drive through them, all the signage will be in French and English. So I had to think about that. I mean, I didn't answer him like very educational wise like this. I was sort of like, English. Because again, I was a child. I was like, English side, because I'm from the West. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's cool, so I guess. And then he went into the other stereotypes of Canadian, like, oh, I bet you're really nice, and da-da-da-da-da. However, I keep thinking back on that, and I was like, whoa, do people really think there's this magical border between the East and West side where one side is only English, one side's only French? Crazy. People view us that way? Wow, that's wild. Because I assumed everyone was like, well, every country has lots of different languages spoken, and they're spoken wildly. There are other countries, even when I was that young, I knew they had official languages and things like that as well. So I was like, why, does that mean, for example, Belgium, do they think that half of Belgium speaks Dutch and half of it speaks French too? Do they? So it was just, that made my mind kind of go thinking about stereotypes quite a bit and how we're perceived and how crazy it is. And I really do believe that it was those, being confronted with those over and over again in Las Vegas, literally for 5 days straight, just constant stereotyping and everything like that, has made me really want to travel more so I can start to whittle away at my own perceptions and stereotypes of other places. Cause we are always told things kind of like offhandedly about other places, like, oh yeah, Americans are really rude and they're awful people. While there are those awful people, sure, it's not a good representation of the entire country. Some of my very close friends, who I will be talking about in my travel experiences, are American. And they're wonderful people. They do so much for charity. They make me laugh and smile regularly. You know, they're not all rude. They may have certain beliefs or perceptions of the world because of they are American, and those are the things that I'm like, ugh, that's where I will not talk about that with you. But, we get to know those things, and you understand why those things are real, like politics in America is just one issue that if you're going to talk about it, you have to realize there are extreme beliefs in both directions, and then you're going to have to just take it with a grain of salt unless you can have a very calm, level-headed approach to it. So we have that. I've also been told like the French are really, really mean and horrible as well, but I know some really cool, amazing Frenchies, or people that I know that are from France are genuinely pretty cool. So starting to whittle down those preconceptions are super important, and I think traveling is what has really done that for me. So that was what happened in Vegas. I believe, I want to say that was around 2005 or 2006, because I remember going into grade 6 that year. So I think 2005, 2006 was when that happened. And since then, it opened my mind to traveling. It took a little while. It took me until 2015 to go on my very first trip alone. But it was always something in my heart that I wanted to do. Ever since Vegas. I wanted to travel more. I wanted to do more. And I mean, we still traveled a bit. Like, we traveled the West Coast a little bit for Canada. So we went to British Columbia once or twice to Invermere. So just basically, if you picture the Rocky Mountains, they basically are the border between Alberta and British Columbia. They go a lot more into British Columbia, but that's basically, we share the Rocky Mountains. We basically went from Alberta just to the other side of the Rocky Mountains in Invermere. So not too far into BC, but we went to Invermere we traveled all over to Alberta because I was a bowler, so we went to a lot of cities for bowling tournaments and things. And by the way, it is a running joke in my family that if I have a bowling tournament, there will be a snowstorm. As predominantly in my life, every time we had to travel somewhere for a tournament, it was snowing like crazy. Even in May, because we always have a May long weekend tournament here where I bowled. Every time I had to travel for that, it was blizzard conditions. So luckily I'm not in bowling tournaments anymore, so that joke kind of has faded over the years. But when I was younger, that was a constant theme. Oh, Violet has a tournament, it's gonna snow. Sure enough, it snowed. So there you go, a little premonition humor for you guys in the podcast. But yeah, so anyway, we traveled around Alberta quite a bit. Went through Saskatchewan a little bit too when my mom met my stepdad. When we met his families, we went to Moose Jaw, Regina. No, we didn't go down Regina. Moose Jaw, Saskatoon, other places. So, we traveled between the 3 provinces, and that was really it. It was cool and exciting to see a new place, but it never filled that pure excitement, adrenaline, and thrill as going to a new country or a new part of a country. Sticking to the West Coast, you're like, yeah, I get it. It's pretty much the same. Oh, they use different highway color signs. Cool. But that was about it. Which then led to my very first solo trip in 2015. This trip, I don't even remember how it happened. I was making jokes between Patrick Static and I and the mods at the time, saying that we should all meet up and go to a convention sometime and finally meet each other. We've been through so much. We should do this. Then all of a sudden it became evident that, oh, I can't afford it. I can go. Would you like me to come? And then all of a sudden, yes, I want to meet my Canadian mod, and all the excitement and build up. And it happened. So in 2015, I flew down to California by myself. Very first trip. Oh my goodness, the nerves were real. All I will say is, thank goodness I have a parent who works in the airport. Having that kind of secure prep to travel was good. Make sure about liquids and these kinds of things, and don't bring this, don't bring that, have this, make sure you have this, you're going to need water, make sure you go to the bathroom, all these things was super helpful, because if you don't know those things, you may get a little bit of a surprise when you go through airport security. Especially, I've learned that security in different countries are weird. Only when you fly to America, you have to take your shoes off when you go through security. That's the only security thing I have to do is to America, is to take off my shoes. Every other time I've traveled, you keep them on. You keep them on and you just walk through the scanner. So there you go, there's that little tip. When you fly to the States, you have to take off your shoes in security. So fair warning, make sure your shoes are clean and not too stinky. Let's not torture the poor security people. Anyway, there's that. So I was really lucky. I had all that prep and I knew how to pack my suitcase thanks to having my mom there to help. All these things. So I was feeling pretty good. It was still extremely nerve-wracking. As soon as I went through security and was by myself, the nerves hit. And I still have those nerves a little bit. Not as extreme as they used to be. But when you walk through security and all of a sudden you're on the other side, your mind is just going crazy. Will my luggage arrive? Will I get there? Is this the right gate? Am I going the right direction? Do I have time for food? What time is it? Do I have everything I need? I have to pee. Can I leave these things around? No, I have to bring them with me. Is the bathroom going to be big enough to have all of it with me? All these little things make your mind go crazy. I definitely still have that. No matter what I do, no matter how much I've traveled, I still have those thoughts okay, do I have everything? Passport, ticket, boarding pass. I've got all that. Headphones, gum. If I was a long travel, sleeping medication. Do I have all this? Yes, okay, good. Do I have my chargers? Your brain kind of goes through this mental checklist. So that was definitely me, for sure. flying to San Francisco. However, as soon as I got on the plane, all of that kind of went away. I was suddenly very excited, very nervous of meeting this guy, meeting Patrick for the first time. I was like, oh no, he's gonna see the real me. Is he gonna like the real me? Oh gosh. So went through a lot of that before the plane even took off. However, since the plane took off, I was like, oh, I'm gonna meet him. This is gonna be real. I get to see lots of California. Oh my goodness. And it's true. So for that trip, I flew to San Francisco. We drove to Stockton, that area. Yes, my brain is suddenly forgetting other names of the Lodi, Sacramento, that area. We were in that area. So I got to see those cities, obviously, those 4. We were in that area of Cali. And I stayed there for 2 weeks. Well, a week and a bit in that area. Because at the end of my trip, we went down to Anaheim, California, by car, driving to Anaheim, California. So I got to see a lot of California. It was really, really cool. What can I say about each place? Stockton, I didn't get to see a lot of, but I got the vibe that it's a pretty small city, and some parts you couldn't go to because it was a bit dangerous. So I had my In-N-Out. I finally had In-N-Out. So if you guys are American or know about West Coast America, In-N-Out's a huge burger chain there. So I got my In-N-Out there. Lodi, I got to see the very first A&W ever, which is cool for me because A&W to me up in Canada has the best poutine. One of the best poutines. So that was really cool. Got to see it. And I had no idea that the first A&W was created way down there near Sacramento. So that was kind of a cool thing to see, and see also the very typical American companies that, in Canada we get a lot of American commercials. So seeing like commercials for JCPenney and Kohl's and all these things that we don't have up here was like, oh, that is a real place. That is a real store. Is that a good store? And asking those very ridiculous questions and hearing the wildly different opinions was very amusing to me. But what was really cool about that trip, and you guys know him well, that, if you know me well, you know him well, I met Spam in person as well on the first time. That's right, my good friend, Spam Waits. He tall, I short. That's really all you need to know. Mind you, I'm short to everybody. I'm only 5'1", so I'm very tiny. But he's tall. He's taller than Pat as well, I think. Or they're the same height. That part I don't remember. But I know he had a friend taller than him. And then other friends that were like my height. So that was pretty cool. That was great. Well, with him, I got to go to Sacramento for the day. It was interesting because we went to the Capitol State Building. So it was wild to see Arnold Schwarzenegger, by the way, as a portrait in the Capitol State Building as Egg, state governor. Wild. I was like, he's an actor. That's crazy. Daryl can attest, Daryl Spam, he can attest to how many photos I took. His friends and him probably have been through the Capitol State Building a lot. Me, it was my first time. So I was that typical tourist who took a lot of photos. And by the way, that habit has not gone away. I have tons of photos stored on my computer, on hard drives, on USB sticks of all of my trips I've been on. And it's because I've taken so many that I have multiple USB sticks at this point. Yeah, I take a lot of photos, but for me, I've learned sort of after that trip that, souvenirs and like physical things and material things weren't as important to me as a photo. So I think I'm justified in taking 1,000 photos a trip because I want to capture those moments and those memories and keep them forever. Whereas a memento or a keepsake could get lost if you move, could be broken, could be stolen, all these things. For me, a photo is worth 1,000 words, and I believe that for sure. So yeah, we went to Sacramento, Capitol State Building. They were going to take me to Old Sacramento. However, they chose to take me to IKEA. Now, I'm very disappointed with the IKEA thing because I have IKEA in Canada. There's an IKEA in my city. Why am I going to an IKEA in a city that I've never been to before? It was weird, but we had a lot of fun anyway, so I guess it wasn't too bad. But I still joke about that to this day with him. Sorry, Spam, but not sorry. Oh, his friend Adrian and I also got to go down to Modesto in California. I don't know a lot about Modesto. I know that they make some kind of alcohol beer, I think. I want to say beer, probably beer. We went down to Modesto for some reason, but we had good food, and it was a good time. Found out that I didn't like artichokes. Yep, that's a thing. But yeah, no, we still had a good time. We were laughing a lot. Interesting music playlist, by the way. Those guys know how to pick songs, and also don't know how to pick songs. I'll just leave it at that. As you can tell, I had a good time. I was also hanging out with Pat, where he was actually building the connections at that time back 5-6 years ago. He was building those connections with Wade and Molly and Gar and JP. He was just kind of forming those relationships at that point. So I actually got to meet Wade, Lord Minion 777. I got to meet Wade and talk with him on Skype. So that was cool, and he added me on Skype, which was like, ha ha ha. But yeah, he ended up staying with us at VidCon in Anaheim. Also, I gotta say this, the hotel that Pat picked for our trip in Anaheim was great. It was sort of a wintry cottage theme, and I thought it was perfect because I'm from Canada, and he sort of made the joke as well, so that made me happy. But for VidCon, we had Wade, Pat, me, and Marie, so Pat's girlfriend. We all stayed together in a hotel and attended VidCon in Anaheim. That was wild to me. I had a list of all the creators that I wanted to meet, and I managed to somehow meet them all, which was amazing. And I'm still sort of in awe that I've met Matthew Santoro, Wade, I've met Markiplier, Captain Sparkles, Aurelian, Gar, so many people, Day, Wade's editor, AJ, M, so many people. I met a lot of people. Oh, Super Mary Face, that's not her name anymore. She does more of I think Mary Making It is her channel now, where she does a lot with her adorable, precious family. Yeah, so it was a really amazing time. I had this huge list, and I still have it, where I was able to check mark it. Every time I saw the person, I had to check mark by it. So obviously with Wade, it was every day. So check. Yeah, it was great. I remember fangirling so hard that I was so quiet when, I think a couple people left to go get drinks at this one event. And we were all left at this table with Markiplier. And he just looked at us, he's like, wow, are you guys gonna say anything? You're a quiet bunch. And all of us were like, hi, yeah. And then someone ended up asking a couple questions. So it ended up working out. We got out of that awkwardness. We were all kind of starstruck. We're nerds. However, we got more comfortable as the convention went on. And my highlight, the amazing highlight for that trip, was playing Cards Against Humanity with Wade, Mark, Izzy, Ross, so Rubber Ninja Ross, Game Grumps Ross, Holly, oh, there's so many people, Pat, Marie, Gar, Day. Yeah, we had a lot of people anyway. So could you imagine, back in 2015, someone like me got to play Cards Against Humanity with, not just Cards Against Humanity, but drunk Cards Against Humanity with all these people. Yeah, that's the highlight. I really should move on to another trip here at this point, but I will say one more memory that I love very much was, I can't remember what the prompt was for the Cards Against Humanity, but the answer was the cause of 9/11 or something like that. It's the 911 response card. I remember that answer was being read out to the prompt, and Markiplier looking directly at me going, oh, I bet the Canadian played that. Nice. Real nice. To make the joke about one of the most traumatic things in history. Nice. And I was like, I didn't do it. I didn't play it. However, because that response was so strong, that card won, and we found out that Marie played it. And she's like, they're laughing so hard. Mark's like, oh, great, of course, the person from Chicago played it. Wow, that's close enough to Canada. Wow, you two. Ridiculous. Such a good time. I loved it. There were downsides to that trip. VidCon wasn't really what a lot of people expected it to be back then. There weren't a lot of like vendors where you could buy a lot of things with, or just a lot of like activities to do per se. There was just a lot of like panels and meetups, a lot of booths where you had to like sign for something and get it for free, but then you had to pay for it after a while. So that was a little disappointing. And there was a lot of negativity around that, which caused a lot of tensions and dynamics to kind of be awkward. However, you know, it was still a good trip. A lot of fun. I would do it again. And I have. I did get to go to another convention a few years later, 2017, in Indianapolis. But before we go to that, to Indie PopCon, before we go to that trip, I have traveled once before. And that was when I was dating someone from Oregon. If you've been around me long enough, you know who. So I'm not going to even put the username out there or say who it is, because there's a lot of complicated things about that, and I will get to that in a bit. However, I got to go to Oregon in 2016 in May because my boyfriend at the time, his parents were doing their silver anniversary, 25 years remarriage, and I was invited. And I was so excited. I was like, what? Yo, okay? Because at the time we had been dating online, strictly online, for like 2 years. So I figured, you know, it is time. Let's do it. Let's go meet the family. So you know how I told you guys I was nervous about my very first trip alone? Well, second trip alone, the nerves were probably tenfold, as there were some extra things added to that pressure. Oh my goodness, this guy I've been talking to online for years, he's finally gonna meet me and see how like short I am, how pudgy I am, my actual facial expressions. He's gonna see me. And then, oh my goodness, I'm gonna meet his parents. I hope they like me. He's got siblings. He's got like 3 brothers. Oh my goodness, I hope they like me. I had all that nerves and anxiety, and I cared so much about that first impression that I was like a shaky, nervous mess all the way down to, I had to fly into Washington, and then we drove down to where he lives, so Pasco. And it was so awkward. I didn't know what to say or what to talk about or ask or do at all. Oh, it was such a mess. But that first trip was really good at the same time. Getting through that awkwardness and kind of pushing through it. I was really busy with the family, let's be real. It was all about the family and the big events. So it was kind of fun trying to like help get ready for that, talk to the family, get to know them. It was really sweet, actually. I felt just part of it. Like I was just there and I was part of the family at that time. It was really, really sweet. And then the ceremony was beautiful. But also just Oregon in general, like that whole Oregon-Washington border, that area. So this is northeast, like that corner. It's beautiful. There's like a gorgeous, huge river, mountainside, hillside, lots of trees and forests. It's gorgeous there. I remember that, like being in awe of it. The town that we stayed at, nothing to shake a stick at too much, but they did have good food. And we got to go on an in-person date, which is cute, and I liked it. So, the first trip to Oregon was great. Later that year, I got to go again, and that was for a lot of reasons. My birthday, his brother's birthday, and his mom's birthday, because we all had our birthdays in September, so we ended up celebrating it all together. That was an amazing trip. Awkward things happened, as they always do, because again, it's the second time you're only really seeing them in person, trying to build that chemistry and all that. Awkward. It didn't quite work out very well, but you know, it was still like that time with the family and everything that was really, really great. And his mom had said that like it's nice to have like a daughter finally after having just boys in the family. So that was really sweet. Again, I got to see more of the city and more of that part of Oregon, and it was beautiful again. It wasn't the best trip because I also came down for his prom, but there wasn't we didn't get enough information, and because I was older than 21, there was supposed to be a form I had to fill before attending, and we never knew about it and never got the form, so I ended up not going to his prom, which sucked. A lot. No, that was back in May. That was my first trip. Right, so we did that in the first trip. Second trip was a lot better. Way more better. Closer. Nicer. However, that first trip, that prom thing was also really disappointing. We ended up doing prom in my own hotel room. I just put on music and danced. It was really sweet. Really, really sweet. Good times. And since then, I've never been back. Because the end of 2016 was not good. I'll leave it at that. But between those two Oregon trips, I got to go to Indianapolis, Indiana for Indie PopCon, and I went with a bunch of friends that I met on Vox Populi and Minecraft. And I was really excited because I got to see, again, Wade, Tyler, Bob, Molly, Gar, D-Live, Entwin, Day, AJ, Jace. So many people. So many people. I had a list of everybody that I wanted to see, and I got to see all of them thanks to being luckily connected to people. And it's being a mod for Pat. So that was cool. Having that little connection, I guess, was really I felt like a rock star at times, while also hanging out with my Minecraft friends. Perfect balance. Indianapolis, though, was such a cool place. Like that city. Because I just was open. I didn't realize these things had been discovered or had been like a real thing. So, for example, they were openly allowed to drink in Indy. I don't know if you guys know this, but in Indianapolis, we went to a bar a couple times just to have some drinks and hang out. And we saw like these bicycles, like beer carts basically, where people were drinking beer off tap while also cycling. And I was like, whoa, that's a thing that can happen in a city. And they're like, yeah, Indianapolis is pretty liberal compared to the rest of India. I was like, whoa, what? And sure enough, people would be like openly drinking down the streets. And I was like, dang. And at the time I made the joke of like, this seems very European to me. Now, not all of Europe is like that, but there definitely are parts of Europe that have the open drinking law. So I wasn't too far off from that little joke. It was really cool, though. Oh, also, they had this entire street outside of the convention center that had Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi on that street was way better than the Wi-Fi in the convention center. FYI. I don't know if it's gotten better over the years, but back when I went in 2016, it was, yeah. It wasn't the greatest in the convention center, but it was really good outside on the street. I had to use it a couple times when I got lost or I couldn't find anyone. I mean, what? That happened. Also, FYI, that trip made me learn to look up the map of places before I go. Because getting consistently lost and separated from friends and not sure about travel plans or, things for your phone or how to connect to Wi-Fi or, get the passwords, it was a hot mess the first day. However, you get used to it, you figure out what has Wi-Fi, what doesn't have Wi-Fi, and you have fun. I met Jamie and Travis and Caitlin as well. My goodness, I met so many people at Indie PopCon. I miss all of them. The years have not been good, let's say. 2016 was not a good year. I'll leave it at that. It is with a heavy heart, though, that one of my Minecraft friends that I did hang out with at Indie PopCon, Mecca, he ended up actually getting killed, the year later. Yeah, year later, in a car crash back where he's from in Florida. So, Indie PopCon will always be kind of special because I was able to at least meet him and gets back. Yeah. Oh, I forgot all about that. For a moment there, I had written it down, and I guess because I was in such a rush to write down the list of things that I've done, I never actually felt it. But yeah, so Mecca, I love you. Yeah, the Indie Popcorn was great. Definitely a lot of fun. Got to see a lot of panels. I got to go to a Ruby panel, which was great because I was really into Ruby at that time, and I still am. I love Ruby, let's be real. The anime. I got to go to that panel. I got to meet the voice of Mario, which was really cool. I love him so much. Also the voice of Claptrap. Again, I'm really bad with names, guys, so just like Google it if you don't know who, or if you know who, just be like, oh my god. Yeah, I got to also meet some of the voice actors from Ruby as well. Winter, voice actors for Winter, the voice actress for Blake and Yang. Meg Turney, so I know her because she's Neon Cat in the anime, but also she's a phenomenal creator in general, so I love Meg Turney. A lot of the Rooster Teeth team as well. Indie Popcorn was just an amazing experience, and it felt like my niche compared to VidCon, where it's definitely more about like creators and like creating videos and content and that kind of convention. Indie Popcorn was like, here's pop culture. Here you can be a nerd and get your nerd on. And everyone around you will not judge you because they're all nerds like you. So it felt like you had your niche there, and it was really great. I want to go back one day, but that might be a while. Anyway, that was my trips and travels to the States. Again, amazing experiences. Some hard times where, dynamics weren't as natural as you thought they would be in person. Also getting lost and feeling naive to traveling at that time was definitely interesting. But it was a great chance to just learn and grow and become a better traveler, which leads to my next experience, which I have a lot to get into, so bear with me. But when I say that I've been in a place for 6 weeks, you kind of have to expect there's a lot to go through. For those that didn't know or don't know, back in 2017, I spent 6 weeks living in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico, teaching English to a group of girls in an orphanage. There was many reasons why I did this trip. One was I've been learning Spanish for years. I took it in high school and I was doing it all throughout university. So I wanted to really go to a country for a decent amount of time to keep working on my Spanish and build it up. Second reason was I wanted to do something like volunteer or give back. I had been so beaten down from university. That I wanted to just do something, like give back. Because it had been a couple of years since I did a lot of volunteering. So I let university kind of beat me down, and I wanted to stop and kind of do something good and help out the world in a way. So there's that. Third reason, I was doing a certificate in international learning. I managed to enroll in that program while still in university, completing my education degree. So also there's that reason too, education. I wanted to teach as well and get that a bit of experience too on my resume, which has helped me a lot. So there's that. As well as the certificate where you had to choose to either volunteer in an international center in your city, or you could travel abroad and work for a minimum or volunteer for a minimum of 6 weeks. And plus, I have distant family that lived, I guess they moved back up here, so they had lived in Nuevo Vallarta, which is pretty close to Puerto Vallarta, and they owned a bed and breakfast, so it'd be kind of cool to meet them, see them, and I got to stay there with them. And I was the only guest they had, which was epic. Mind you, it was in summer that I traveled to Mexico. It was hot, but luckily they had a pool at the place, and we were a very short, 15-minute walk to the beach. I survived. It was great. That was also the first time I got to see the Pacific Ocean and actually go in it and be like, haha, I've been in the Pacific Ocean, what up? So there's that. But the experience itself will be something I never will forget, because we also fundraised a lot of money for that trip. I brought down $750 US, I believe, or Canadian, I can't remember. I ended up donating all of it. No, that's right, I fundraised up to $1,000. Donated $750 because I had extra expenses, because the cousins said they would cover most things, and when I got there, they didn't. So I had to take a little bit away from that to just help with expenses in the 2 weeks. Plus, I had to buy a lot of materials for the actual orphanage itself, so I ended up splitting it a bit. So the $250 went to a little bit of living expenses. I think pretty much $200 of it, though, went to all of the teaching materials I needed, as I was basically abandoned and left alone as soon as I showed up to start teaching there. So I had to buy materials and curriculum things and plan a whole curriculum and teach it within like 3 days because I was completely abandoned, and the guy that ran the program traveled back to the States for a surgery, and he didn't tell me about it. So, hard experience. I was panicking a lot. But $750 went to a sister orphanage that they were opening that would be in partner with the orphanage I was actually at. So I basically really helped them finish furnishing, decorating, and preparing the actual house for the orphanage with the money I gave them. Plus, they were able to get extra, educational materials and toys and clothes for the kids too. So that was a really humbling experience. I have pictures of me with the organizers, and it was really, really great. The teaching part, like I said though, it was a challenge. I ended up going home that day when I found out that I'd be left alone, or going to my cousin's place, and thinking, okay, when I was learning Spanish, what did I struggle with the most? And it was learning vocabulary and kind of, filling in the gaps between grammar, translation, verbs, and then vocabulary. So I ended up spending the whole night, instead of, going into Puerto Vallarta to travel and vacation and experience the place, I spent the whole night creating a week by week group of vocabulary words based on like a topic and the grammar needed to talk about those things. And I created a curriculum based on that. So we did like groups. We did food and how we talk about food. We did sports, family, pets, weather. I think those are the 5 things. So I put a bunch of vocabulary words for each category and then taught them very basic phrases on how to express these things. So, for example, my favorite food is quesadillas. Or my favorite food is a quesadilla. My least favorite food is da 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 da. And it actually went well. I got really, really lucky, and the students were excited about it. As the weeks went on, my Spanish also kind of grew to like the more colloquial, there we go, there's the word, the more colloquial way of their speaking. So when I was in Mexico, I got teased quite often by locals saying that I was too formal, muy formal, muy formal with my Spanish. Because again, you're taught in academic sense, not necessarily in a cultural context. So I was getting teased quite often, your Spanish is too formal, it's too formal. So I ended up learning how to get away with the colloquialisms, and luckily I had my cousins to help as well. It was hilarious, always being teased, but being too formal. You don't need to say all these things, just take out that word and just say it like this. So after, a week or two of being teased a little bit and kind of mixing it up a little bit, I got into my groove, and I was able to get through that experience and survive it. It was really good. Now that when I had that experience, I was like, okay, I've learned that I am quite flexible. I'm really able to just kind of think on the fly and prepare for something, or at least have something prepared, which is super valuable in teaching because there are oddly many things that can go wrong with a lesson, and you have to be able to figure out how to redirect it or use what you've got to kind of finish the objectives for the lesson. So Mexico really helped solidify those skills in for me and helped me on my practicum quite a bit, my last practicum, as I was doing adult education, and I needed to learn a lot on the fly. Anyway, but Puerto Vallarta, by the way, Mexico, that part of Mexico, beautiful. Puerto Vallarta specifically, they have a really wonderful gay district that has a lot of beautiful colors and buildings, unique shops and restaurants, right along the Malecon as well, which is this beautiful boardwalk right along the ocean. It's just a beautiful place, and I loved it a lot. I want to go back. What made that trip even more special is that my gran, she came down and spent the last 10 days with me out of the 6 weeks. So I got to show her what I've learned and what I do, and she got to come to the orphanage with me a couple times to see me teach, and we played bingo. Played English bingo, which was great. And we also did a couple other extra things. We went to a tour in the mountains to see San Sebastian, which is one of the oldest towns in that region of Mexico, where there's a lot of mining and excavations and metal making, jewelry, those kinds of things. It was just a really unique little town to learn about. And then when the Spanish came in and how they influenced that region, a really, really cool tour. I'm really glad we did that. And we also, there's another little city that we went to that was really like touristy trap. Definitely a tourist trap, because there's lots of shops and people were trying to get you to buy things. But again, it was along the ocean, a beautiful beach. Still a really beautiful and colorful town, but definitely touristy trap. But it was still really cool to go up through the mountains to go there. So yeah, see Mexico, beautiful area, and definitely recommend doing one of the millions of tours they have. San Sebastian was my favorite. A lot of history, a lot of culture. If you're into that, I recommend it. Oh, we also did tequila tasting. That's right. We didn't get a chance to go down to Tequila, Mexico. But where we were, near San Sebastian, kind of on the way up and on the way back, we got to stop to it on a tequila farm, and we did tequila tasting, and I brought some home with me because it's really yummy. Yeah, that was a good time. So Mexico was a really big, important trip for me, not only because of, again, traveling alone, staying in a place for 6 weeks, trying to make sure you have everything you need for 6 weeks, which was hard. Being thrown into a situation that was not what you expected it to be, and then trying to learn how to recover from that in a very short amount of time. Building on the flexible skills as a teacher, writing your own curriculum and delivering it to a group of girls with the age ranges of 5 to 13. It was an amazing experience. I will say it was hard, especially when people are teasing you about your Spanish and you don't even know they're teasing you about your Spanish until your cousins tell you. Yeah. It was hard in some ways and culture shock a little bit. I mean, where else are you going to walk around and see iguanas and crocodiles just randomly walking around the road? So, there were those things that were like, what? However, it was still, I think that was one of my favorite trips that I've taken as well, because of what I was able to do and building a connection with the girls and seeing parts of Mexico and learning more about the history and the gods that they believed in. It was really cool. Definitely a phenomenal experience for me. Now, I'm going to move into my Europe trips here, but I think I'll save that for part 2. I'll finish up with my last trip to America, which was last year, 2019? Or I guess not last year, last year's 2020. 2019 was my last trip to America. I'll finish up with that trip real quickly, and then I think for part 2, I'll do all of my travels in Europe for part 2. that might be a great idea. Just to split up North America and Europe. So, let's segue. The last trip I took to America was actually to the East Coast. So I've been in every single time zone at this point. Yeah, literally. Every single time zone in North America I've been in now. What an accomplishment. And I've been in the Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean. That's pretty cool. I gotta say that. That's pretty cool. So, this last trip was to Virginia Beach. And I got to meet with my now old D&D group. You know how 2016 wasn't nice to anyone? 2020 wasn't nice to anyone either. But anyway, we got to meet my D&D group that I've been playing with for like 2 years with. We got to meet in person, all of us. And we got to go to Virginia Beach. What was cool about that trip is that I flew into Orlando. And my friend at the time, Aspire, picked me up and a couple others. Stayed at her place the night over. And then we drove all the way from Orlando. She lives outside Tampa. Yes, Tampa? No, near Orlando. Driving all the way from down there all the way up to Virginia Beach. So in that essence, I have seen Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia Beach, West Virginia. I'm not great with the states. Los Angeles. But I got to see all of that East Coast and drive all the way up. It was really, really cool. And there's a funny moment where driving up, because I'd been in Europe for a year. Yeah, a year at that point. So I hadn't seen any like North American restaurants or advertisements or billboards in like forever. And the first time we were driving up, I saw a Wendy's sign and I was so excited. I was like, Wendy's! And I screamed it, and everyone in the car just broke out laughing because they're like, are you okay? What's happening? Are we going for Wendy's for lunch? And I was like, yes, please. It's been so long. Oh, so much fun. Yeah, we had a really good time. That trip was super funny, super good. Played a lot of games, did a lot of eating and drinking and going to the beach. It was a really good time to bond and get closer with them, which now makes me sad because I only really have 2 friendships left of that group. But, you know, with the years, with travels, and with things happening in life, friendships change, the world changes, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Leave it at that. But Virginia Beach is a really cool town as well. I really, really liked it. Yeah, there's like art galleries or cool, funky little shops down like the main street near the beach. Dairy Queen, which I was excited for because, again, North American business. And I had been in Europe a while. The only thing that sucked was I couldn't do the actual swimming part of the trip with my friends because I was on my girly monthly thing. So, yeah, and they told me about sharks, and I was like, I'm not going in the water if I'm bleeding because sharks what? But I still walked over to the edge, put my feet up to like my ankles in the water just to say I've been in the Atlantic Ocean. Haha. I did it. Don't worry though, I actually did put my feet in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, kind of. It was sort of the little bit underneath Granada in Spain. And I touched that part that led to the Atlantic Ocean. So I've touched seas. There you go. But yeah, that was a really good trip. Bonding experience with my friends. Played D&D a little bit, which was cool. Played in person. Yeah. It was really, really good. And just like talking to people one-on-one and making meals for each other. It was really, really cool. A really good time. Good trip. Good experience. Good drive. Seeing all of the East Coast states, which is really neat. Well, not all of it, but most of it. Again, really, really cool part. I definitely recommend it if you can do that. Drive along the coast and see places because it's cool. Well, that was a lot. We went through 2005 all the way to 2019. skipped a few places and countries in between, but there's a lot to talk about with my travels in Europe. I did a lot more traveling in those years, so that one will be part 2 in next week's episode. Yay! So not bad. First episode, Travel Experiences, North America edition. Next week, we're going to Europe and all the lessons learned. And yes, so I hope you guys liked me rambling for the first hour of my first podcast. I had a lot of fun going through memory lane, writing down all of the places I've been to, the experiences, some good, some sad, some heartbreaking. But you learn a lot, and I hope I conveyed that through what I was able to talk about. With that, I hope you guys will give me some feedback in the comment section. Let me know what you think, or if there's anything I should do or add. Also, like if you liked it, obviously. That would be good and helpful. You can dislike it if you disliked it, but tell me why in the comments. And as always, if you have not subbed before, please do that now. Click that little button. Click the bell so you get notifications when I upload. And the next video I do will be more Dream Daddy. With that, lovelies, this is the end of Dragyn's Den, episode 1, part 1 of Dragyn's traveling experiences. I will see you all in my next video on Monday. Bye! Bye-bye! And thank you for listening.